welcome inside episode 7 of the Scully Scoop podcast. I'm your host, Adam Scully. It was awesome to have the gang from the Preferred Lie on episode 6 of the podcast. Lots of great feedback and reaction from that. And hopefully we're playing some golf at some point soon. Here in Toronto right now, snow on the ground, May 11th. Strange times for sure. We're going to talk about golf and hockey on this week's edition of the podcast. A dear friend of mine, Bryan Black, is my guest this week. He is the former vice president of the Hockey Hall of Fame and possibly the youngest person to see the Maple Leafs win their last 2 Stanley Cups in person in 1964 and 1967. Let's hear from Bryan Black. And we're pleased to welcome in the former vice president of the Hockey Hall of Fame and possibly the youngest person to see the Maple Leafs win their last 2 Stanley Cups at Maple Leaf Gardens, my dear friend, Bryan Black. Bryan, how are you this morning?
I'm okay, Adam. Thank you. How are you today?
I'm great. It's we've talked about having you on a podcast for quite some time now, back in my former days of the Going for Broke podcast, and now it's fun to finally make this happen. Times are certainly strange in the world right now, but how has life during COVID been for you?
Well, like a lot of people, it's been safe. First of all, thank you for asking. And so my kids, my grandkids, everybody seems to be okay, but they're restless, bored like everybody else. We're just talking about the weather. I think it's a blessing that it's lousy where I am north of Toronto because I can't go outside and golf or do anything anyway. And other than probably needing a bad haircut, I'm doing okay. Thank you.
Well, it's funny you mentioned the haircut because I cut my hair for the second time during COVID. I went a little short to the wood on the sides here. It almost looks like I put the bowl on my head and just shaved around. But if you need a haircut at some point, I can give you my services.
Yes, I can see that. I don't know about the wood for me. I got these ears, as you can tell, but it's all right. It'll be a couple more weeks, I think. We'll probably be able to get a trim, but yeah. Thank you anyway.
You mentioned golf. We'll get to playing golf in a little bit. We've had some success as partners playing golf in the day as well. We'll get to that in a couple of moments. But first, let's start off with this article that came out probably about 10 days, 2 weeks ago in the Toronto Sun about you possibly being the youngest person to see the Maple Leafs win their last 2 Stanley Cups at Maple Leaf Gardens. Tell us about that.
Well, yeah, I think I have to be. I'm 63. I was 7 and change when they won in 64. So, and then 10 and 67. But it came about a guy by the name of Mike Wilson, who got a lot of notoriety last year because he went to every Leaf game. And they're writing a book. He and Lance Hornsby are writing a book about that experience. And Wilsey knows my story from 64, where I was 7 years old, sitting by myself. The article was a little misleading. My mother was at the other end of the building, and my dad was up in the Grays. And just before puck drop, 4 seats are beside me are wide open. I'm in the corner. Andy Bathgate was coming right down on me for the first goal. And Bobby Hull, Orland Kurtenbach, Jack Dennett, who was a famous broadcaster, and I think Terry Harper, 4 guys who I think about it now. I don't know why they were together, but they probably came out of the stove. And Bobby Hull sat right beside me. He was my favorite player, even though I was a huge Leaf fan. Bobby Hull was my favorite player. And I guess I got a little excited and peed my pants, and I'm not embarrassed to say that. We all have that experience at some point in our life. It's too bad it's coming back. But anyway, that's another. And so he thought that story was pretty cool. And then the whole point about being there in 67 as well with my dad, and that was sitting right behind the visitors bench, 4 rows. So the chief was basically right in front of me when he fired the puck into the net for the 3-1 victory. So, yeah, I mean, if somebody's younger than that, God bless them. But, I mean, I was a hockey crazy kid. And so at 7, I'm there with my gray flannels and my little blazer and probably a tie on and screaming my brains out beside Bobby Hull. So that was the genesis of the story.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool story. And I mean, other than the fact that you peed yourself, what was it like sitting next to Bobby Hull? Like, what was it tough to get the nerve
I'm sure I drove him crazy. I mean, I remember I'm a 7-year-old kid. I have a grandson about the same age who knows every Leaf player, everything about every and he never stops talking about the Leafs. So I'm sure I drove everybody crazy around me. I recall one sort of yelling at the ref and everybody turning around, sort of smiling at me because I think I was right, and stuff like that. But Bobby Hull, I mean, I met him years later. Before I got to the Hall, obviously I talked to him there. But at 16, I had the good fortune. I won the scoring championship in a midget tournament in Hull. And our ambassador to our team had Bobby show up. And you've been to those tournaments. You sign autographs, which is pretty cool. So Hull was razzing me about, big shot signing autographs. And I said, hey, Bobby, you won't remember me, but I know you probably remember being at the 64 Stanley Cup game. And he said, yeah, the Leafs played the Red Hot. And I said, yeah, 4-0. I said, look, I'll apologize now. I hope I didn't pee on you. Well, he started to laugh because I told him the story in detail. And then we joked about it later when I had the good fortune to work at the Hockey Hall of Fame in the 90s. So that was always a chuckle. I can always say I got a kind of an inside story with I think, the greatest left winger of all time.
It's a great story for sure. And another thing about, seeing the Maple Leafs win the Stanley Cup twice is that you're actually seeing the cup being presented. And obviously you have the experience of the Hall of Fame as well. And not many people can say they've seen the Stanley Cup in person, but what was it like actually seeing it presented and carried around the ice?
Yeah. Well, it was nowhere. I was saying in the article to Lance that it was a ceremony for sure. Clarence Campbell and people booed him, and they came out and, he handed the trophy to the chief both times. Pretty, people are standing up, but, there's no music like there is today. There's no lights. It's a different atmosphere, a lot of respect. Everybody's dressed to the nines. And as I watched those games on TV this last little while, there's a lot of well-dressed women, like more than I see today in terms of going to a hockey game. It seems to me I see a lot of men and kids. I'm generalizing a bit, but really noticeable, the women dressed with the hats and the coats and the whole 9 yards. But the ceremony is kind of subdued. The players come together. Nobody takes it. Some guys grab it, I remember, but nobody skates around like they do now and find their family and they kind of leave. And it's I'm sure they have a great time in the dressing room. And that was part of my story, leaving. I think my dad sort of made a left when I made a right doing up my coat, and he lost me in the mayhem of the people. But we were out of there pretty quick. But pretty cool, yeah. I mean, the Stanley Cup is, that's what we all kind of, when we played ball hockey, that's what we were playing for, right?
100%. It's what we all aspire to as young kids, and who knows? Maybe the Maple Leafs will be soon on the horizon for a cup. But who knows when we'll be playing hockey? Well,
if they win it and I'm still alive, maybe they'll include me like that old guy they had in some other parade. Stick the old guy in the parade.
Yeah, I think you should get a day with the cup. I think that'd be.
Well, I had 5 years every day with the cup, which we'll talk about the Hall, I'm sure, in a little while.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I mean, that article and Lance Horsby calling me, it was and especially in this time where we're doing a lot of sitting around and reading and reflecting, it was cool to relive those two stories and those two Stanley Cups for sure.
That's pretty awesome. Okay, we'll get to the Hall momentarily, but we have another connection as well in minor hockey and hockey in the fact that you were coached by the great Sherry Bassin. Sherwood Bassin. So Sherry, for those who don't know, drafted me in the Ontario Hockey League with that plaque right there in 2008. What was your relationship like with the great Sherry Bassin?
Well, it goes back a long time. In 1972-73 was my first year midget. And it was not a happy way that I got to Wexford, but because all my buddies played for the Nats that year, and I'm like the last cut. The guy calls me in and says, well, Bernie, I'm sorry, we got to let you go. I said, oh, you're cutting Bernie Johnson, who, oh, by the way, had the assist on Gordie Howe's 500th goal. And he goes, no, we're not cutting Bernie Johnson, we're cutting you. And I go, oh, okay. So now it's like exhibition games are on, and I got no team. Anyway, Wexford needs one player. I happen to get there. We're a fourth-place team, not doing anything special. Tim Young is on our team, who was a first-round pick of the Rangers, I think, or L.A. One or the other. He got traded. Anyway, they fire our coach at Christmas. Like, there's only 3 of us that are first-year midget. I'm firing my coach? Really? This is okay. Sherry Bassin comes in. He's not 35, I don't think. It's his second year coaching. Anyway, first thing I noticed that was different, and you would probably know this about Sherry, we found some ice up in Sharon, which is not too far from where I live now, but it was like an overnight trip. back then. We used to practice 2 hours every Sunday morning, and the first hour was no pucks. And so, Guy, I mean, by the long story short, the other thing that Sherry did, which was weird, we were, long-haired hippie guys, tough guys. And Sherry says in the dressing room and on the ice before the first game we ever play, he yells out, "What do we come here to do?" And we're supposed to yell, "Win." And we're looking at each other like, we go, "Win?" What are you talking about, win? Anyway, by the end of the season, we won the All-Ontario Championship that year in midget. But the highlight for me was winning the Toronto. You had to win the Toronto first before we played Kingston and Sudbury. And we were playing the Nats. And all my buddies who cut me. And in Game 7, I happened to steal the puck from the right defenseman at the blue line in North Toronto Arena and go in and score the winning goal in Game 7 to win the GTA championship. And when guys talk about, doing something against their old team or a team that traded them or cut them, absolutely. I mean, I would have been ecstatic had it been Mississauga Reps, but it tasted a little better being the Nats. So Sherry was the most intense. We just had a 40-year reunion of that team a couple years ago. Right. And he looks good. I used to see him around. He is an intense coach. But I said to him, every guy told a story, and I said, that thing about what did we come here to do? Win. Yeah, right. I said, Sherry, I coached a lot of kids, my own kids, boys, girls. And I said, guess what I did before every game in the dressing room? And he just had a big smile on his face because what did we come here to do? And my thing with kids coaching, just on that, was, winning's not the only thing, but wanting to is. So while you're here, let's try to win, or why are we keeping score, So he was that kind of guy.
Yeah,
you know what he's like.
Yeah, he's so passionate, and I haven't spoken to him in a number of years. I'd love to try to get him on this podcast for sure, because the stories he'd be able to tell, the only person to trade Eric Lindros twice, and the career he's had, and yeah. I believe he's one of the only people who doesn't wear socks at all. I wonder if that's still a thing.
Wow, I didn't know. I know Paul Beeston. We'll get this to Sherry. To Sherry. Yeah, because you got to get him on here. He's a character, too. Funny guy. He was one of the first guys. The other thing he did for minor hockey, one of the first guys to start getting guys on scholarships down to the States, because I think he went to the University of St. Louis, and both my centerman and my right winger ended up going there. I somehow didn't think – I thought I was supposed to play in the NHL, not go to school. But he was one of the premier guys for getting Canadian guys down there in the early 70s. Not a lot of people were going.
That's interesting. Yeah, he's a great guy. He's a very passionate man, and obviously a little more notoriety, I guess, in more recent years when Connor McDavid was in Erie, Ryan O'Reilly, guys like that. So he's had an unbelievable career. Hopefully he's doing well.
At one point, I remember saying when I was at the Hall, so it's 95 to 2000, he was the assistant GM for the Quebec Nordiques before they went to Colorado.
Yep.
So that's not bad. That's not bad.
Yeah, it's crazy. It all sort of comes full circle. So you mentioned coaching as well, but you have a nephew, Eddie Pasquale. He's had quite a wild career. It was a chance for us to watch his first NHL win together against the Detroit Red Wings in a shootout. What's it been like following his wild career as a goaltender?
Well, he's a goalie, as you know. So that's he was he came out of junior. They thought he was going to go. Everybody went down to Montreal except me, and I was kind of like the bad guy for not going to his draft. Well, he didn't go in the first round. The rumor was Philly was going to take him in the first round. I said, and the night before the draft, they signed Ray Emery out of the KHL.
Oh, wow.
I went, ooh, that's not good. And so Eddie went the fourth round to Atlanta, which was, okay. They went to Winnipeg pretty quickly, and he had 3 great years in St. John's, really good years, semifinals. He got hurt, missed a year, got traded a couple times, but we saw him play 3 games for Tampa last year, which is really exciting. I mean, that was, especially that Detroit game when they were down, 5-3 with 6 minutes to go. Yeah, anyway, and he was great in the shootout. So it's funny. He's over in the KHL now. He just signed a new deal with is it Locomotive, the team that they had that tragedy a few years ago, but that team's been in existence since the 50s, and it's a pretty powerful team. He's and Mike Polino is the guy who played in the NHL, is the coach over there. So, it's tough. He went over there, and it was like the training camps were like, army barracks, single cot beds. And it's like, uh-oh, what do I got myself into here? But, he's playing hockey. He's getting paid some pretty good money. And he's making a living playing hockey, which is what, again, back to our ball hockey days, that's what we all wanted to do at some point. And in our family, there was a lot of people put the blades on. I had another nephew. My son played junior A a little bit. But, he's playing hockey and living the dream.
It's wild how it works, and you never know. We've seen journeyman goaltenders, especially, Tim Thomas, for example, a guy who was all over Europe and then came back here, won a Stanley Cup in 2011. I mean, with another NHL team coming into the mix in Seattle, who knows Freddie, right?
Yeah. And I just saw some team just signed a goalie from the K. Somebody's coming back.
Yeah.
A Russian kid.
Oh, I think you're right too.
Well, who knows? There's only 30 real jobs and 30 more gate openers. I guess it's going to go to 32, but and you get to play a little bit, but you're living, so it's not a lot of numbers. Think about the number of goalies that are out there. That's a tough slug, and so to even be at the KHL level, it's pretty good.
100%. Yeah, he's
a good goalie. He's a really good goalie.
He's a good goalie. He's big too. He's a big guy. He takes up a lot of the net, and he's, as you mentioned, in fantastic shape too.
Well, he's a beast. Yeah, it's just timing, luck, and timing, and injury. It all it's like the rest of life. A lot of timing.
Everything happens for a reason. That's for sure. Okay, let's talk about your career at the Hockey Hall of Fame. You were the vice president of the Hockey Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
How did that get started?
Well, that got started. I had left Blacks in 93 or 4, and I was working for a friend of mine on an ad agency, Purdue Advertising at the corner of Yonge and St. Clair, where I helped him for about a year and watched a lot of the OJ trial. Sorry, Rick. And I got a phone call that I knew the guy that had been there for a couple of years, Phil Deniers. When the hall opened in 93, Toronto downtown was booming. The Blue Jays were on fire. Theater was a huge deal. Tourism was big. So the Hall of Fame being at Yonge and Front had a fabulous start. Well, suddenly the next year, baseball goes on strike or is a lockout. I don't remember which one. The theater thing dries up. The Hall of Fame is in a bit of trouble for attendance because it is an attraction and it's all the trophies are there, the Stanley Cups there, but they had a lot of interactivity built into the new facility at Yonge and Front when it moved over from the CNE. But it had kind of the reputation, I think, as Hockey Hall of Fame and museum. Well, kids don't want to go to a museum. The word museum and hockey don't really connect. Mm-hmm. So they wanted a marketing guy. It got down to me and another guy who I know used to work for the Canucks. And I think Scotty Morrison and Frank Selke and a few people. I know Brian Burke, he doesn't even know how he helped me, but I ended up there for 5 years. It was fabulous. And what we did was, there's a commercial that a lot of people still remember where a guy was getting hit in the face with pucks, and the punchline was, "So much fun you won't know it hit you." And we had hip music, and so it was a strong commercial which drove the business, made the hall look like a fun place rather than an old museum. Stopped showing the bank building, which is beautiful but looks old and tired, And so we had some pretty good success for a few years and a lot of fun. I mean, they say you shouldn't meet your heroes, but it was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Being around all the hockey guys. And the induction ceremony, as you know, is huge. Capped off for me when Gretzky retired in 99. That was unbelievable.
Yeah, you mentioned Gretzky at the end there in the article by Lance Hornby. You told a pretty cool story about Gretzky waiting in line. Tell us that story. Yeah.
Well, the day they announced, so it happened very quick that Wayne was going to retire in 1999, which was pretty cool, as your picture behind would help illustrate. Mm-hmm. Wayne couldn't be, I don't know where he was. He's probably flying to Toronto. He couldn't be on the phone the day they actually announced it. So the next day, the hall's buzzing. There's people everywhere. There's lineups. It's going to be good for business. And I'm walking down the corridor and I see Wayne. I kind of do a double take. Gretzky is in line, probably 10 or 20 deep actually, to pay to come into the hall with one of his kids, maybe two. So I recognized him, went over, introduced myself, and said, "Well, come on, we'll take you." And he said, "No, I'm okay here. I'll just go in line and go in with my kids." And by the time he got in, now everybody kind of knew, and we had people around him a little bit quietly. But he just kind of announced to the crowd once he got inside the hall and said, "Hey, folks, how you doing? Thanks for being here," because everybody applauded. And I'm just here with my kids having a good time like you guys, so have a great day, and we'll see you as we walk through. And then that way, people pretty much left him alone, He made that announcement, and everybody said, "Hey, thanks." They clapped, and and he went. down to shoot pucks in the Wayne Gretzky exhibit, probably. I think he told the story about the guy not recognizing him and giving him instruction how to shoot at the Wayne Gretzky exhibit.
Yeah, that's a good one. So, okay, you mentioned Gretzky here. Obviously, I'm I'm 28 years old. I never saw him play live.
Yeah.
You saw him play throughout his career. If for someone who didn't actually get to watch him during his career, is there an NHL player comparable, or like what was it like actually watching him, see how dominant of a player he actually was?
Well, the thing about him was he never got hit. Like, I keep noticing that. I'm watching the 77 or the 87 series. Actually got creamed in game 3, and he coughed up the puck for the first goal. Sorry, Wayne. The announcer said it was Doug Crossman's fault, but he rarely got hit because he could see everything so unbelievably. Like, people tease me about peripheral vision, but he had eyes in the back of his head. And so I think that was the one thing. The kid on Calgary, who's the guy that's and Marner to some degree, they're going They're going faster than Wayne was going, but it's the same kind of thing. Like, they're not big guys, so they can move easy and quick. They see everybody. They know where everybody is. And then I'll tell you, that 87 game, watching that again, that really was the beginning. Lemieux was already great, but Gretzky brought out the best of Lemieux in that series for sure. And then Mario carried on his own. But because he wasn't, like, I was watching, and you watch his career. Messier was great. They had a lot of good players. Gretzky just seemed to be around the puck. Like, rebounds would come off the end boards, and there's one player in the camera shot, and it's Gretzky, because everybody's over there, and he happens to be where the puck was. And they talk about that sixth sense that he had, because his shot was good. I mean, he had a pretty good slap shot, actually, I think. Yeah. But he was just, he just was around the puck and never really got drilled. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that was the era. There's some pretty big boys. You watch those games, a lot of hooking, clutching, grabbing compared to today's game, and he got through it.
Yeah, the game has changed so much. Watching some of those highlights of the clutching and grabbing and obstruction, that sort of thing.
Now, the other thing he had Semenko and McSorley kind of floating around too, which was always I kind of liked having a pretty tough right winger there too. And that doesn't hurt Gretzky, that's what they used to go by the other team's bench and say, "You guys keep hitting Gretzky." Well, Pavel Bury's not going to be very happy pretty soon. So
yeah, that's for sure. Okay, so you spent 5 years at the Hockey Hall of Fame. What would you say is your favorite memory from your time at the Hall?
Oh, I think Gretzky's induction. That was like royalty. I mean, I remember I still have a relationship with a lady who was Mike Harris's assistant, and now she works still in a pretty high level. And it was right at the last minute, and Mike Harris he was the Premier of Ontario, wanted to come to the induction. And this event, like, there was rumors that Richard Gere was going to be there. We had phone calls. So I had to tell this lady that, I'm sorry, there isn't a spare inch in this room for the Premier. I'm saying, I know that you're not used to people telling you that. So anyway, we had a great relationship. As it turned out, I said, okay, here's what we have to do. And how many people does the Premier, normally travel with? Oh, about a half a dozen. I said, so no, here, what's going to happen is I'll meet the Premier and one other person in the parking garage of BCE Place and smuggle him up the back door through the kitchen kind of thing. And he stood in the corner, and I apologized 50 times. But it was that kind of event, that's like, it was like the Academy Awards of hockey. And then there was interesting stuff too, and I'm just reading some books that refresh me. I was there when the Alan Eagleson saga came to an end, which was kind of interesting to be in the room, listening to all the perspectives. Yeah. But so, yeah, I would say probably those two things. And then just sort of, if anybody's ever been to BCE Place, it's worth going to BCE Place just to see that facility, especially at Christmas, and then the Hall of Fame being right there, and that bank building. And you walk up those stairs and you look into that stained glass ceiling, and then the trophies are there and the Stanley Cup is there. It's a pretty magical place.
Yeah, I haven't actually been to the Hall of Fame in a number of years. And at some point when all this COVID stuff ends, I'm going to have to pay a visit down there, look at the Stanley Cup, look at all the trophies, because it's just been so long. Yeah,
well, and what's ironic is, well, for me, TSN actually took me. There's a lot of corporate events there, and at the beginning, that TSN is a title sponsor, and that's who took me the first time I ever went.
Right.
They had a half a dozen official openings, so each sponsor kind of had a night, and then a year and a half later, I was working there, which was pretty interesting. So I have to, that's just, again, right place, right time, right person referred me, and I got, I wanted to play. I wanted to get paid by the NHL. I guess the Hall of Fame is part of that. So for a few years, I thought I'd be with skates on, but it was pretty cool.
Absolutely. Oh, it's a great story for sure. Okay, so I mentioned golf off the top. We've played a lot of golf together,
Yes.
Blackie, and we're taping this on May 11th. The PGA Tour is announced that they're going to restart 1 month today, which does seem a little optimistic, perhaps. But what are your thoughts on this new PGA Tour schedule? The fall could be a pretty exciting time if it all pays out.
Fall is going to be unreal. The Masters, I guess I see their point. They either want to open or close the season, so that's cool. I think, I don't know. I think in a month, maybe things will be okay without spectators. By then, I think we're going to be reacting different to everything. But if the golfers, the whole thing's going to be complicated if they're doing testing. What happens if one person gets sick, and how do they make it work? But I think people need, especially as this weather turns, I think the masses need something that gives them a ray of hope, some optimism. And I think golf was the first guys to kind of shut it down on that, or maybe the last guys to really shut it down. They played that Thursday at the Players, and I remember people the next day were so grateful that they had played because the day was such a disaster. At least it was an outlet. And if the Players will do it, there's certainly enough space in golf. You and I have talked about this. Like, I think we could do social distancing pretty easy with no rakes, no pins. 2 of the 4 guys are going to be in the woods half the time anyway. The other 2 guys, you don't really rendezvous till you get to the green anyway. And I think society and people now are keeping a distance. And I don't know if the pros, there's some risk and there's insurance risk, but you and I'd play, well, I wouldn't play today. There's snow on the ground, but I'd play golf today if they let me.
100%. I'm with you too. I don't think I'd wear a mask, but I might wear 2 gloves, like the Tommy 2 glove or Phil Mickelson in the rain, that sort of thing.
Yeah. The mask, especially with glasses, it's a real pain too because they fog up. But boy, I'll tell you, a lot of people are wearing masks, which when you go to a store, you can't blame them. On a golf course, I don't know, but I'd wear whatever I have to wear, and I'd play.
Exactly.
Give me the rain suit. I'll put it all on.
Yeah, we might lose a couple pounds sweating if it's still sunny outside eventually, whenever the heck the sun starts coming out. But something else with golf as well. We just had the preferred lie on the last episode of the Scully Scoop podcast. You also do a lot of course ranking. And for some, when they're ranking a golf course, if they play well, hey, I love this place. If they don't play well, this place sucks. But course ranking is way more than that. For you, what are some of the major factors when you rank a golf course?
Right. Well, I think playability. I can't play from the tips anymore, so I go with some guys that they'll play from the back. I'll play from the whites. Somebody will play from the front tees, and that gives it a nice variety. But playability is so important. Like, we talk about this at Bayview compared to other places where there's not a lot of carry off the tee. So people of all skill levels can play, age, skill level. You go to some courses where you've got to hit it 220 to hit it over the ravine off the tee. That looks real pretty and it's a nice shot, but it's not playable for a lot of golfers. So I try to, I'm a 9 handicap, 8 handicap, so I can still, I can relate. I can be a 15 too on any given day. So I try to think about the playability, speed of play. I think that a golf course shouldn't take 5.5 hours because it's too hard. 4 hours should be manageable-ish. And then, you get into things like beauty and speed of greens and some technical things. But really for me, is it playable for players of all levels? Will they all enjoy this golf course? And that's probably the biggest thing.
Interesting. Yeah, for me, I always look at par 3s. If there are 2 par 3s that are the same distance or you're hitting the same shot, to me, that's an automatic red flag for me.
Yes. Yeah, we played Port Carling, which is a golf course of people that I love, and they're four par 3s. I rank them like they're spectacular because we do rank the par 3s, the par 4s, and the par 5s. And you're right, the par 3s differentiate a golf course because the par 4s are the par 5s they're similar, but par 3s really, because you get to see the whole hole, really differentiate the course. You're right. So par 3 is another biggie. Yes.
Yeah, well, I mean, hopefully we get to play golf here. I don't know, some point in the next 10 days, 2 weeks. Who knows? It seems like it's getting closer, but I guess who really knows? And it seems like the weather's getting a little closer. Blackie, we've taken a lot of your time, but before we let you go, I ask all of my guests this. Obviously, Augusta National is assumably on everyone's bucket list, so that takes that off. But other than Augusta, what would be a course that is on your bucket list to play?
Well, there's probably a couple.
Yeah.
There's some fabulous Florida golf courses. I've had the privilege of playing them, but Seminole is a course that I would be on my bucket list. I have played the Medalist, which was very cool because that could have been on my bucket list. And then I hear that Bandon Dunes in Oregon is kind of a must, trip. There's others. Cabot I've been to, which is great. And then the whole Europe thing, the Scotland, Ireland bucket list courses. But I would say Bandon Dunes for sure is a course that I would like to get to sometime. I know it's hard to get to. That's one of the hurdles. And then there's other little courses. I'm not sure they're bucket list so much, Adam, but I'd like a St. Thomas in St. Thomas I've played, but Westmount, I would really, want to play Westmount one day. Because there's some fabulous golf courses in Canada. We don't have to go too far to find bucket lists. The travel and the excitement of another country. But when you look golf course for golf course, pretty strong right here in Canada, I'll tell you.
It's very strong. Well, it sounds like we should coordinate a Black family, Scully family trip, maybe to Bandon Dunes. Maybe that could be on the horizon.
Wow, that's a thought. Put it out there. Yes, that could be very nice. I know some. I'm headed to Scotland a year this fall, hopefully, with my two boys as part of a trip with 16 guys that I went to school with. Because my guys are always bugged. Let's go. We got to do this. So I thought, well, this will be the last chance for that. But who knows if that, by that, that's even a year and a half away, and we don't, who knows.
Yeah, who knows? Hopefully we're all playing golf here soon, but let's keep our fingers crossed. Well, Blackie, it's been a pleasure to have you on the Scully Scoop podcast. Thanks much for your time, and I hope to see you soon at Bayview.
Adam, thank you very much. I know my busy schedule has prevented this from happening in the past, but it's my honor and privilege to be on the Scully Scoop, episode 7, I believe. And thank you very much. Have a great day.
Have you seen anything like that?
Thank you again for Bryan Black for joining us here on the Scully Scoop podcast. You can find Bryan on Instagram at BFBlackie41. He was also the former president of Bayview Golf and Country Club. Some great stories, especially with the Hockey Hall of Fame. And possibly the youngest person to see the Maple Leafs win their last 2 Stanley Cups in person, 1964 and 1967 at Maple Leaf Gardens. And hopefully we're playing golf at some point soon. Blackie and I have partnered well together in the past, winning some dollars here and there, winning some matches. So hopefully in the next 10 days, 2 weeks, who knows, we'll be playing golf here in the GTA. Well, this has been another fun podcast, episode 7 here on the Scully Scoop podcast. You can follow us on Instagram at Scully Scoop, and I continue to post all these podcasts on Twitter. Follow me at Adam_Scully. Well, thanks so much for joining us here on the Scully Scoop podcast. We'll see you next time.